Stop yelling at her, the little girl said, her voice small but absolute. The man she spoke to wasn't just any man. He was a mafia boss, a storm in a suit, the kind who didn't need to raise his voice to end a life. The restaurant froze. Every eye turned toward the red-dressed child who had just told a monster to calm down. And then the waitress, Mara, bent low, her lips barely moving as she whispered one word that sliced through the silence. Run. In that instant, innocence met power, and the city's most dangerous man found his match in a 7-year-old who didn't know fear. Stories like this deserve to be remembered. Subscribe and share. Sunset poured across the rooftop when the room went brittle. The man in the charcoal suit carved the air with his voice, neat and precise. Glass stems chimed. Then a small figure in a red dress stepped between him and the trembling waiter, chin lifted like a tiny judge. "Stop yelling at her," the girl said. Every fork paused. His gray eyes narrowed. The waitress bent, hand to her mouth, and whispered one word. Run. Hi, beautiful soul. Welcome. If courage versus power is your thing, hit subscribe and say where you're watching from. This one begins with a whisper in a city that only pretends to be gentle. Now, back to the terrace. 10 minutes earlier, Elysian Terrace was choreography pretending to be dinner. Crystal caught light, oysters sweated on ice, the skyline waited to be applauded. Mara moved through it with a tray balanced on fingertips and a prayer behind her teeth. Section B hummed. Section C lagged. A busboy at pastry nicked his thumb, and the kitchen clock slid 3 beats off the music. She mouthed 1 minute toward the pass. The violinist leaned into a love song. Table 12 belonged to the charcoal suit, not a shouty regular, not ostentatious, worse, still. He had ordered a Bordeaux that made sommelier misty. He wasn't impatient, he was measuring. The exits, the staff, the mood. 2 black suits by the balustrade adjusted their stance. The manager smiled like an oath. Mara had seen a face like his once while carrying coffee down a courthouse corridor. A voice, dry, careful, had floated over a stack of files. Rinaldi. If the name's in the room, keep your head down. Money that arrives with manners and leaves with signatures. The busboy returned, pale and rapt. The corner birthday tort needed 90 seconds. The oysters for 12 gleamed like gilt. The manager attempted a smile. The violinist played louder. The sky burned from amber to ember. The city tilted toward something sharp. Mara approached 12 with a calm that was mostly theater. "Your oysters are coming," she said in the voice reserved for diplomats and disasters. His reply cut cleanly. "This is unacceptable." He didn't raise his volume. The sentence arrived fully armed. The junior waiter flinched. Champagne sighed. The suits by the rail shifted. A wire tightened through Mara's chest. The thread under every good restaurant, keep it beautiful, whatever it costs. Then she saw the girl. Scarlet dress, hair like soft ink, eyes the color of questions. She had wandered from the rail where a woman with interview nerves checked her phone between smiles. The child made a straight line across the stone and stood in front of the man like a sworn witness. "Stop yelling at her," the girl said. Not loud, absolute. Time lost its posture. Surprise touched the man's face and retreated. The suits changed their stance again. Mara's mouth went dry. She bent to the girl, "Because you go to the smallest person first." She hid the tremor with her palm and whispered, "Run to your mom." Now the girl nodded and obeyed with the solemn dignity children reserve for missions. The suits didn't move. Neither did the man, which meant Mara had chosen correctly and might still have chosen wrong. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he asked, not to the room, to her, as if the answer might change gravity. "I know who she is," Mara said. "A guest." She set the oysters down with deliberate care, as if porcelain could be armor. "And I know we're human beings, not targets for your schedule." Something shifted behind his eyes, calculation brushing curiosity. "Your name," he said. "Mara." He tried it on like a cufflink. Either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. Her legs were gelatin. Her voice had a spine. He glanced toward the rail, to the suits, to the table where the child, Ava, if her mother's soft scold could be trusted, hid in an embrace, still peeking over a shoulder. He nodded once, placing a piece on a board only he could see. "That will be all." She walked away because that is what you do when the sea pretends to be a floor. In the service station, Carlos the pianist kept his hands above the keys. "Are we?" "Play," she said. The manager drifted over. "What did you say to him?" "The truth." Quietly. "Do you know who he is?" "Someone whose name doesn't buy him a louder voice." It felt good and reckless at once. Service resumed with a fervor bordering on prayer. Plates flew. The city remembered to glitter. When Mara returned to 12, the man's expression had cooled into perfect hospitality. He thanked her with a civility that made her shiver. The check arrived heavy, a tip that could fund a semester and a note, neat and disciplined. Respect is returned in kind. On his way out, he paused near the rail where Ava balanced on tiptoes to see the skyline. He didn't speak. He left a linen-wrapped parcel on the side station and walked away. Inside lay a raspberry millefeuille the pastry chef swore he hadn't plated. Anonymous? Dangerous. Closing folded the night small. The alley light that flickered all week burned steady. The wobbly section of railing no longer wobbled. Mara noticed and did not say thank you to no one. In the locker room she sat with the note, the whisper's echo, the picture of a child in red. The world pretended it was simple. It wasn't. She thought of the courthouse corridor and the name that travels like a draft through closed doors. Rinaldi. Money that arrives softly and leaves without footprints. The warning to keep your head down. She looked at the ceiling, then at the city beyond it. She had told a child to run because sometimes running is braver. She wasn't running, not yet. Tomorrow brings more questions than plates, and at Elysian the sunset is right on schedule. Tomorrow, the man in the charcoal suit would arrive on schedule too, and with him, the problem Mara could no longer serve with a smile. Transition to backstory. What Mara didn't know yet was why Victor Rinaldi kept choosing dusk, why the suits never stayed for dessert, and why a little girl's single sentence had just moved a hidden war onto her section. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us keep these stories alive, and trust me, the best part is yet to come. Now let's get back to it. The next evening, Elysian Terrace gleamed as if last night had never happened. The tablecloths were bleached into obedience, the glassware stood like soldiers, and the sunset dripped its usual honey over the skyline. Yet beneath the elegance, something held its breath. Mara felt it the moment she stepped onto the floor, the kind of silence that isn't peace, only a pause before repetition. He returned. Victor Rinaldi. Same table, same time, same chilling calm. The maitre d', too polite to tremble, greeted him with the deference reserved for mayors and men who owned more than buildings. Rinaldi's eyes swept the terrace once, exits, corners, people. Then he sat. A suit in black stood by the rail, pretending to check his watch. Another lingered near the stairs. The orchestra, without instruction, shifted to something low and string-heavy. Mara caught herself staring from behind the counter. The manager saw it and gestured her forward. "You'll handle table 12. I thought Christine had that section tonight." "She's feeling unwell." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're steady, Mara." He likes steady. Mara didn't like any of this. She straightened her apron, collected her notepad, and crossed the floor. Every click of her shoes sounded too loud. When she reached the table, Rinaldi didn't look up right away. He was reading something on his phone, thumb scrolling slowly. Then he set it down, face impassive. "Good evening," she said evenly. His gaze lifted, deliberate. "It is, isn't it?" His voice carried the same unsettling calm, velvet over steel. He ordered simply a rare steak, a glass of the Bordeaux he'd opened the night before. No apologies for last night, no acknowledgement at all, only composure sharpened to an art form. Halfway through service, she found an envelope beneath the silver tray that carried his drink. Inside was a note, just 6 words written in clean script: "Respect is returned in kind." And beneath it, cash that made her blink twice, enough to cover rent, groceries, and still have a number that felt like guilt. "Who leaves this much?" whispered Christine, materializing beside her as Mara tucked the envelope away. The kind of man people whisper about. Marco, the head waiter, murmured from the wine station. Politician, maybe an investor, maybe worse. "Maybe both," Christine said. "My cousin saw his face on the courthouse news once." Mara ignored them and focused on routine. Fork on the left, knife on the right, glass stem polished until it caught the city lights like flame. But she couldn't unhear the whispers. When she approached with his meal, he was on a call, not speaking much, just listening. A pause, then a quiet, "Handle it," before he set the phone aside. No goodbye, no thank you. Conversation for him seemed optional. People obeyed silence. She placed the plate before him. "Your steak, sir." He nodded once. "You remember the wine temperature?" "It's what you ordered." "That's not an answer." His tone wasn't reprimand exactly. It was study. "I remembered because I listen." That earned her a flicker of something in his eyes. Amusement, faint and fleeting. "Good." Few do. Mara turned before she could feel whatever that was turning into. At table 7, Ava sat beside her mother, legs swinging under the chair. When her dessert arrived, a tower of strawberries balanced like small planets, she spotted Rinaldi across the terrace and waved. Rinaldi's fork paused midair. Ava grinned and waved harder. He looked startled, then, almost imperceptibly, nodded back. The tiniest acknowledgement. Clara, her mother, blushed and whispered something, probably an apology. Ava ignored it. He looks like Grandpa when he forgets to smile. Mara's hand froze halfway to the espresso machine. She waited for a reaction. None came. Rinaldi resumed eating, his expression unreadable. But she saw it, the barest twitch of his mouth, as if an unfamiliar muscle had been reminded of its purpose. Later, when Mara brought his check, he was watching the skyline. The sun had dropped lower, painting the glass towers in molten orange. He didn't look at her when he said, "Beautiful city from up here." Almost makes you forget what's beneath it. Depends on what you're trying to forget. He looked at her then, fully. "You're not afraid of me." She didn't answer right away. The truth was complicated. She wasn't sure if it was courage or the kind of numbness that comes after too much adrenaline. "Should I be?" He tilted his head slightly, as if considering it. "Not tonight." A waiter brushed past, breaking the stare. The moment folded back into normalcy, or something that pretended to be normal. As he rose to leave, he gestured subtly to the man by the rail. The guard disappeared into the crowd, reappearing seconds later by the stairwell. The coordination was quiet, efficient, an orchestra of obedience tuned to one conductor. Rinaldi slipped on his jacket, movements precise, almost ritualistic. "Until next Thursday, Mara." He said it like a certainty, not an invitation. After he left, the terrace exhaled. Music brightened. Laughter found its courage again. The air seemed lighter, though Mara's chest wasn't. "Until next Thursday?" Christine echoed as they polished glasses. "He already booked another reservation?" "The same time, Marco confirmed, glancing at the ledger. He called this afternoon, requested her section. Mara forced a laugh that didn't sound like her. Maybe he just likes the view. Or maybe, Christine whispered, he likes knowing who'll be standing closest when he doesn't. When they locked up that night, Mara lingered by the terrace rail, the city sprawling beneath her in glitter and shadow. She tried to tell herself it was coincidence, that he came for the food, not for the silence she had given him. Down on the street, a sedan idled for a moment before pulling away. No headlights flashing, no sound but the hum of departure. The following days, she found small signs of his presence where he wasn't. A bottle of the same Bordeaux ordered by a stranger in her section, a replacement set of wine glasses delivered without invoice, the busboy's hospital bill mysteriously covered in full. Every act of generosity landed like a threat with good handwriting. By Thursday, Mara had convinced herself it wouldn't happen again. Men like him, she thought, lived in patterns only until they didn't. Yet when the sun began to bleed across the skyline, she saw him step from the elevator. Exact time, exact posture, same empty politeness. He looked toward her immediately, as if skipping all the pretense of chance. "Good evening, Mara." "Welcome back, Mr. Rinaldi." He gave the faintest of smiles. "You remembered." "You're hard to forget." That earned a soft chuckle, the sound of a man unused to laughter. "Then let's hope that's not a curse." When she turned away, her hands trembled slightly. The terrace had returned to life, music, light, laughter, but for Mara, every clink of silverware was an echo of last night's whisper. He had said, "Until next Thursday," and he had meant it. Now Thursday had arrived, and so had he. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps more people discover stories like this one. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, take a deep breath, because what happens next will change everything. Friday night at Elysian Terrace felt like a living orchestra, cutlery chiming, glasses singing, laughter swelling, and money breathing in every corner. The skyline beyond the terrace glowed like molten glass, and for once Mara thought maybe the night would behave. She should have known better. By 8:30, every table was filled. Journalists, bankers, a few faces she recognized from society columns, and one man whose presence silenced rooms without a word. Victor Rinaldi. Same table, same seat. Always near the terrace rail, where the last of the sunset gilded the world just enough to hide the shadows underneath. Tonight, he wasn't alone. Two men in dark suits occupied the table beside his. They talked softly, the kind of conversation that didn't need to be overheard to feel dangerous. And near the bar, a private party unfolded, a celebration for some real estate magnate whose empire, according to gossip, was built on favors and thin ice. They'd brought out champagne, vintage, limited, and loud, the kind of bottles that came with spectacle. A saber rested on a velvet cloth, gleaming beneath the chandelier. Tradition dictated it would slice the first bottle clean open at midnight. But tradition rarely survived men with too much ego. At 9:12, someone noticed the saber was gone. The maitre d's smile faltered. The busboy froze mid-step, tray in hand. The music continued, but the mood shifted like air before a storm. Subtle, sharp. Mara felt the tension before she saw the source. At table 9, 3 seats from Rinaldi, a man with a wolfish grin was laughing, loudly, a rival of some kind. Even Mara could feel it in the way he tilted his head, taunting without words. The saber's absence wasn't theft, it was a message. Rinaldi didn't move, didn't glance their way. He simply adjusted his cufflinks and poured himself another glass. The calm was almost theatrical. The manager began to stammer apologies. The rival's laughter grew. "No harm done," he said, voice rich with mockery. "Maybe the staff's hiding it for tips." Mara's heart climbed into her throat. She moved toward Rinaldi's table instinctively, tray trembling slightly. He caught her motion, Just a flicker of his eyes, and it stopped her cold. He didn't need help. He was waiting. Then, with surgical precision, he set his glass down and rose. "Gentlemen," he said softly. Not loud, not commanding, simply soft enough that people leaned closer to hear. "We seem to have misplaced something sharp tonight." The rival raised his glass. "You mean this?" The saber glinted beneath the table, resting casually against his leg. Mara's stomach turned to stone. Rinaldi's expression didn't change. He nodded once to his man by the stairs. The guard stepped forward, but Rinaldi lifted a hand before he could take another step. "No need," he said. He walked to the rival's table with the grace of someone used to commanding obedience without theatrics. Then he smiled, small, polite, and terrifying. "Keep it," he said. "You seem to need the illusion of danger more than the thing itself." The rival's grin faltered. "You think this is a joke?" "No," Rinaldi said. "I think it's dinner." He turned to the maitre d'. "Their check." "On me. Consider it the price of peace." The maitre d' hesitated, confused. "Sir, it's quite—" Rinaldi's gaze cut through him like frost. "I insist." Within seconds, the tension drained from the room. Not because the threat was gone, but because everyone realized Rinaldi had absorbed it. He returned to his seat, buttoned his jacket, and resumed his meal as if the entire scene had been scripted in advance. The rival's table went silent. The saber reappeared, returned to its velvet cloth by an unseen hand. The orchestra resumed something gentle and French. The crowd exhaled collectively, uncertain whether they'd just witnessed diplomacy or dominance. Mara watched, pulse hammering in her throat. She couldn't decide what unnerved her more, the potential for violence, or how easily Rinaldi had ended it without raising his voice. His control was absolute, yet beneath it lay something colder, something unspoken. A busboy brushed past her, his hand still bandaged from last week's cut. He tripped on the edge of a rug and nearly spilled an entire tray of glassware. The crash drew a few gasps. Rinaldi didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded note, and slipped it into the boy's palm as he passed. "Go get that looked at properly," he murmured. Mara caught the glint of bills, far more than a clinic visit would cost. Compassion disguised as command. "Thank you, sir," the boy stammered, eyes wide. Rinaldi nodded once. "Don't thank me. Heal." The word hung between them like a verdict. From across the terrace, a familiar giggle broke the uneasy quiet. Ava, the little girl in the red dress, sat at her mother's table, spoon in hand, watching everything with innocent fascination. She waved her spoon at Rinaldi. "See, Mommy? He's nice." Rinaldi's eyes softened, barely. The corner of his mouth twitched again, not quite a smile, more an echo of one. He raised his glass slightly toward her. Mara's breath caught. It was such a simple gesture, yet it rattled her. Nice. The word tasted wrong in this room. Ava's mother, Clara, blushed and whispered for her to sit properly, but the girl just smiled, unconcerned by the chill adults wrapped themselves in. As the night pressed on, Mara found herself replaying the scene. The way Rinaldi had neutralized a threat without blood, without even standing close enough to touch it. His power wasn't in what he did, it was in what he didn't need to do, and that, she realized, was worse. Her shift ended past midnight. The party had dwindled to murmurs and wine-stained laughter. As she wiped the last table, she heard it. His name. "Mr. Rinaldi's check is cleared," the maitre d' whispered into the phone. Mara froze mid-motion. Rinaldi. The sound of it tugged something from her memory. She turned toward the terrace doors, where he stood exchanging quiet words with his men before leaving. His silhouette was framed by city light, sharp and regal against the horizon. Rinaldi. She'd heard that name before, Years ago, in a courthouse corridor while she waited for jury selection. Two lawyers talking under their breath. One had said it like a prayer, the other like a warning. Never cross a Rinaldi. You don't get a second chance. The echo of it chilled her now. As Rinaldi exited into the night, the terrace seemed to exhale again. The saber gleamed under the chandelier, harmless once more. But Mara knew better. The real blade had never been lost. It had simply learned how to smile. Mara sat on the edge of her bed, laptop screen glowing against the darkness. The city outside her window murmured, the occasional horn, a dog bark, the sound of distant tires on wet pavement. But inside there was only the relentless click of her trackpad. She typed the name slowly, as if saying it aloud would summon something unwanted. Victor Rinaldi. The search results unfolded like a confession whispered through gritted teeth. First link, Rinaldi Group Holdings. Import and export since 1974. A legitimate face, glossy photos of cargo ships, warehouses, clean suits shaking hands over contracts. Second link, federal inquiry into warehouse seizure. Charges dropped due to insufficient evidence. She clicked. An article filled the screen, dated 5 years ago. Mentions of falsified manifests, missing containers, untraceable commodities. Then a photo, grainy but clear enough to make her chest tighten. The same eyes, same restrained posture. Third link, cold case, reopened. Accountant disappears after audit of Rinaldi subsidiary. No details, no closure. Just a headline that felt like a door left ajar. She scrolled until her fingers ached, until she realized her hand was trembling on the mouse. It wasn't that she hadn't suspected. It was that the confirmation changed nothing and everything all at once. Rinaldi wasn't just a man who commanded silence. He was a man who built it. She closed the laptop. The blue light burned ghosts into her vision. For a long time she sat there, listening to the refrigerator hum and the city breathe. Every time she blinked, she saw him, not looking at her, not even staring, just watching. The way predators in nature watch, calm, certain, patient enough to wait for whatever would break first. She didn't sleep. The hours bled into dawn, and by morning she had made a decision. At Elysian that evening, she walked straight to the manager before her shift began. "I'm not serving table 12 anymore." He looked up from the ledger, blinking as if she'd spoken in another language. "Excuse me?" I said, "I won't serve Mr. Rinaldi. Someone else can take him." The pause that followed felt like stepping into an elevator whose cables had just snapped. "Mara," he said softly, "that's not really your call." "I'm making it my call." His polite smile vanished. "Be smart. Some customers aren't optional." She didn't answer. Just tied her apron tighter, handed him her tray, and moved to Section B. Her hands shook as she arranged the water glasses, but her jaw held firm. She thought she might feel proud. Instead, she felt sick. Rinaldi didn't come that night. The empty table at the rail looked almost harmless in his absence, but when she walked home after closing, the street felt wrong. Halfway up the block, she saw it. A black sedan parked across from her building. Headlights off, engine idling, a faint curl of smoke from the exhaust. Her pulse stuttered. She pretended not to notice, pretended to check her phone, pretended to be invisible. Inside her apartment, she locked the door twice and sat on the floor until her breathing evened out. When her phone rang, she nearly screamed. The screen showed unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Silence. She said, "Hello?" Nothing. Then a soft click. The sound of someone hanging up, not because they'd reached the wrong number, but because the call had achieved its purpose. She dropped the phone onto the couch and pressed both hands over her mouth to keep the sound in. Sleep didn't come that night either. She sat by the window until dawn, watching that black shape in the street, motionless but certain, like a shadow that had learned patience. By the next evening, her eyes burned from exhaustion. She arrived at work early, clutching coffee like it was armor. The manager was waiting. "Mr. Rinaldi requested you again," he said quietly. "Then tell him I quit." The manager exhaled through his nose, tired. "You're good at your job, Mara." "Don't ruin it over pride." "I'm not afraid of him," she lied. As she stepped out into the night, the city's hum seemed quieter, the air heavier. A single car engine started somewhere down the block, then faded into distance. Rinaldi had made good on his promise. The sedan was gone, the fear erased, the problem handled. And yet somehow that was worse, because now she understood this was how he operated. No violence, no spectacle, just a series of quiet corrections until the world bent to his will. Mara looked up at the skyline, its lights glinting like sharpened glass. "He cleaned the mess," she whispered, by making a bigger one invisible. The sun sank low behind the skyline, turning the glass towers into molten gold. The terrace glowed like a photograph, light catching on every polished surface, laughter rising with the hum of violins, and the scent of caramelized sugar from the dessert station threading through the air. It should have been beautiful. For a moment, it even was. Ava was the first to break it. She darted from her table in a blur of red silk and giggles, clutching something small in her hand. Mara, carrying a tray of drinks, caught her before she collided with a waiter. "Whoa there, little comet," Mara said softly. "Your mom's gonna think I let you run a marathon in here." Ava grinned, unbothered. "I brought you something." She opened her palm, a tiny daisy, a little crushed from the journey. Mara crouched to her level, heart softening in a way that work rarely allowed. "For me?" Ava nodded solemnly. "Because you're nice. You smile even when your eyes look tired." The words hit deeper than they should have. Mara forced a small laugh and tucked the flower behind her ear. "Then I guess I have no excuse not to keep smiling, huh?" From a few tables away, a woman called out, "Ava, sweetheart!" "Don't bother the staff." Mara looked up. The woman, mid-30s, auburn hair pulled neatly into a bun, smiled apologetically as she approached. "I'm so sorry." She's curious about everything lately. "It's fine," Mara said, straightening. "She's got a good heart." Makes my shift brighter. The woman exhaled, relief softening the exhaustion in her face. "I'm Clara." I should have said hi sooner. We've been coming here lately. Celebrations, little milestones, I guess. "Busy mom milestones," Mara replied knowingly. Clara's smile faltered. "Single mom, technically." Then she added almost proudly, "Ava's my entire world." Mara could see it, how every wrinkle in Clara's expression was carved by love and fatigue in equal measure. She knew that look. It mirrored the women who worked double shifts, who carried responsibility like second skin. "Can I tell you a secret?" Ava whispered suddenly, tugging on Mara's apron. "Mr. Frown is here again." Mara followed the child's pointing finger to table 12. Victor Rinaldi. He was already watching. Not menacingly, just aware. His glass caught the dying sunlight, his hands perfectly still. The air around him seemed to bend, as if the city itself paused to see what he would do next. "Mr. Frown?" Mara repeated under her breath, amused despite herself. Ava nodded, lowering her voice as if sharing classified intel. "He never smiles. But I think he's nice. He told the man with the ring that yelling is for cowards." Mara blinked. "He told you that?" "No, I heard it. He said it after you left that night. I was sitting over there." She pointed toward the corner of the terrace where the rail met the skyline. Mara looked at Rinaldi again. His gaze shifted, catching hers for just a second, long enough to make her heart misfire. Then Ava waved at him. "Hi, Mr. Frown." The terrace quieted just a little. Conversations dimmed. All eyes turned to the little girl in the red dress waving at the most intimidating man in the city, and he, Victor Rinaldi, the man who could silence a room with a glance, did something no one had ever seen. He smiled. Barely, briefly, but it was there, a ghost of warmth in a face carved from ice. Clara gasped, mortified. "Ava, sit down!" "It's okay," Mara said quietly, eyes still on him. "Let her." "He's not angry." No, Rinaldi wasn't angry. He looked startled, like someone who had forgotten what it meant to be seen as human. Later that evening, after Clara and Ava finished their meal, Mara carried their dessert to the table herself. Ava clapped when she saw her. "You came back." "Wouldn't miss it." When Mara turned to leave, Rinaldi's voice caught her off guard. "You make friends easily." She glanced over her shoulder. "Kids don't care about names or suits. They just know who's kind." "Kind," he repeated as if testing the word. "That's a dangerous assumption about me." "Maybe," she said, "but it's hers." Rinaldi's expression shifted. Something unreadable flickered there. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "People like me don't get to be good." Mara paused. The music swelled faintly behind them. She turned fully, tray balanced against her hip. "Then maybe stop trying to prove that." His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in thought. For the first time, the silence between them didn't feel like threat. It felt like weight. He leaned back, studying her. "You think goodness is a choice?" "I think control is," she said, "and you have plenty of that." The faintest smile ghosted across his lips. "You're bold for someone who pretends to blend in." "Maybe I just got tired of people pretending danger is normal." Their eyes met. The air felt electric, not romantic, but something far more dangerous. Moral tension, raw and unspoken, simmered between them. Rinaldi looked away first, picking up his glass. "Careful, Mara. You sound like someone who wants to fix broken things." "Maybe I just don't want to be one." He laughed quietly, the sound too human for the man he was supposed to be. Ava reappeared a moment later, hands behind her back. "I made you something," she said proudly. She held up a paper napkin folded into what looked like a flower. "For me again?" Mara asked. "No," Ava said with a mischievous grin. "For him." So he stops frowning. She handed it to Rinaldi. He stared at the flimsy creation like it was a relic. The paper, the creases, the childish unevenness. It was absurd, meaningless. But his hand trembled when he took it. "Thank you," he said quietly. Ava beamed. "Now you have to smile." He did. It was small, uncertain, but real. The transformation was enough to make even Clara pause in surprise. When they left later that night, Ava waved one last time. "Bye, Mr. Frown." Rinaldi stood as they passed, hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. For a moment, he almost looked like any man seeing off a family, someone who belonged to the world instead of ruling above it. Then the light changed. The warmth faded. Whatever flicker of softness had surfaced disappeared behind composure again. Mara watched him as Ava disappeared into the elevator, her red dress vanishing like a spark swallowed by the dark. Rinaldi lingered by the railing, staring at the spot where the child had stood. The skyline burned orange behind him. His expression, caught between longing and restraint, was unreadable. For the first time, Mara realized that monsters didn't always roar. Sometimes they simply stood very still, wishing they could stop being one. The night was colder than usual, and the city's air carried that uneasy stillness that comes before something goes wrong. The dinner rush had died hours ago, but Elysian Terrace still glowed faintly against the skyline, its chandeliers like distant constellations in a sky of glass. Mara walked home alone, coat pulled tight, her shoes echoing against the slick pavement. The sound should have been comforting, proof of life in a city that never truly slept. But every footstep felt like it belonged to someone else. At first, she thought it was just nerves. She'd had a long shift, her mind still replaying the way Rinaldi's eyes lingered on her earlier that evening, the silent wars playing out behind his calm exterior. But then she turned a corner and saw them, two silhouettes inside a parked sedan, headlights off, engine humming faintly. They didn't move, didn't look at her, but she knew. That sixth sense that came from working too many nights in too many places. It screamed danger. Mara's pace quickened. She fumbled for her keys as she reached her building, her fingers slick with cold. Behind her, the low growl of the engine deepened, then faded into silence. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, her nerves were raw, her coffee untouched. At the restaurant, she tried to pretend everything was normal, balancing trays, smiling at guests, but the fatigue made her slow. Clara noticed first. "You look like you saw a ghost," she said quietly, as they stood near the bar, polishing glasses. Mara hesitated, then exhaled. "Someone's been watching my building." 2 nights now. Clara's face drained of color. "Did you call the police?" "And tell them what?" Mara muttered. "That I feel watched? That's not a crime until it's too late." Clara set the glass down gently. "Then quit, Mara. Whatever this is, whoever this man really is, it's not worth your peace." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can," Clara interrupted softly but firmly. "You can leave before this place decides what happens to you." Mara opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't, because Clara was right. The problem was, leaving wouldn't erase Rinaldi. That night, the sedan returned. It parked across from her building again, its windows blacker than the night itself. Mara stood at her apartment window, heart pounding, watching the faint ember of a cigarette glow inside the car. Then, around midnight, another car pulled up beside it, sleek, silent, and far too expensive for this neighborhood. The streetlight caught the reflection of a familiar figure stepping out. Victor Rinaldi. He moved with that same quiet authority he carried everywhere, the kind that didn't need to shout to command fear. His men stayed behind him as he approached the sedan. The driver rolled the window down halfway, just enough for a few words to pass between them. Mara couldn't hear what was said, but she saw the shift, the way the driver's posture changed, from arrogant to terrified. Rinaldi leaned down, spoke once more, then tapped the car roof twice. The sedan's headlights came alive, and it drove off into the night like a shadow chased by light. Her stomach twisted. Relief came first, then anger. He'd done it again, solved danger by becoming it. By morning, the car was gone. The street felt normal, quiet, safe. But she couldn't shake the feeling that her safety had been purchased, not earned. At closing that night, she was wiping down the bar when the restaurant doors opened. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. The air itself changed, quieter, heavier. "Mr. Rinaldi," the manager stammered. "We're closed." "I know," Rinaldi said. His voice was smooth, controlled, but his presence filled the room like smoke. "I'm here for Miss Mara." The manager glanced at her, then disappeared into the kitchen, eager not to exist. Rinaldi stepped closer, the soft light catching the sharp lines of his face. "You're safe now," he said simply. Mara dropped the rag onto the counter. "No, I'm not." His brow furrowed slightly. "The men are gone." "That's not the point." The words came out louder than she intended, trembling with exhaustion and fury. You don't get to decide who disappears from my life just because they scare me. I don't decide, he said calmly. I prevent. She laughed, hollow and sharp. That's not prevention. That's control. He stepped closer, and though his tone stayed even, there was something dangerous beneath it, something like wounded pride. Would you rather they stayed? I'd rather you stayed out of it. Silence. Only the hum of the terrace heaters filled the space between them. You think I enjoy this? He said finally. The things I have to do? No, she replied softly. I think you stopped noticing. The words seemed to hit him. His jaw tightened. He turned away, staring out through the terrace glass at the sleeping city. The lights reflected off his cufflinks, tiny constellations of steel and gold. I was taught that protection is power, he said after a long pause. That fear keeps the people you care about alive. But you, he exhaled, almost amused. You make it sound like it's poison. Because it is, she said. You call it safety, but it's just another kind of prison. He faced her again, expression unreadable. I'm danger moving out of your way. Mara's voice trembled. Then stop calling it kindness. Their eyes locked, his steady, hers blazing. The air felt electric again, but this time it burned. He stepped back, nodding once. If that's what you want. It's not what I want, she whispered. It's what I need. He didn't argue, didn't plead, just reached into his jacket, placed a card on the counter and said, If fear finds you again, call me. I'll move it out of your way, too. Then he turned and walked out, leaving the scent of his cologne and something else behind, emptiness, sharp and clean. Mara stood there for a long time, the terrace lights flickering above her. The city hummed beyond the glass, indifferent and alive. When she finally left, she didn't look back. At home, she folded her apron one last time, slipped it into a box, and wrote her resignation on a sheet of paper that felt heavier than it should. By sunrise, it was done. Freedom at last. But as she sat on her bed staring at the card he'd left behind, she realized something she didn't want to admit. Freedom was supposed to feel light. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a rooftop, alone, wind in her hair, staring down into a city still shaped by his shadow. The night was dressed in gold. Crystal chandeliers glimmered like galaxies above the rooftop terrace, and laughter rippled through the air as flashbulbs burst across silk gowns and polished shoes. It was the Elysian Gala, the kind of event where money wore morality as perfume, where every handshake was a performance and every smile hid a story. Rinaldi's world. He stood near the railing, perfectly composed, a glass of champagne in hand, his posture a masterclass in control. Around him, power moved like an invisible tide. Politicians, investors, judges, all orbiting him like he was their private son. Mara had returned tonight only as a volunteer server, filling in last minute after the original staff fell short. She told herself it was just another shift, just another night. But when she saw him, the air thinned. Ava was there too. Red dress, hair in a neat bow, sitting with her mother near the terrace piano. She was supposed to be asleep at home, but Clara explained that her sitter had canceled. She'll behave, Clara had promised, though exhaustion clung to her words. She just loves the stars from up here. The child had a way of turning every room into something softer. Even the stone in Rinaldi's face had cracked once when she waved. Tonight he caught her doing it again, chin propped on her hands, staring dreamily at him from across the terrace. He raised his glass slightly, and she beamed. Then the speeches began. Laughter followed. The air shimmered with music, and no one noticed when a small figure in red slipped quietly from her chair and padded toward the far end of the terrace. She just wanted to see the stars. 10 minutes later, Mara realized the table was empty. She scanned the terrace, her pulse spiking. No red dress, no curious little face, just crowds of strangers, waiters weaving between them and the endless hum of the city below. "Clara," she said, her voice tightening. "Where's Ava?" Clara blinked, half distracted. "She was right." She turned. Her sentence fell apart. "Oh, God, she was just—" Chairs scraped back. Mara's heart slammed against her ribs. Her mind raced through possibilities. Restroom, piano corner, the stairs. She darted toward the terrace edge, calling Ava's name. Nothing. Only wind and music. Then her phone buzzed. No caller ID. Just a text. "We borrowed your brave little judge. Tell the gentleman to answer." Her stomach turned to ice. "Rinaldi." She looked across the terrace. He was speaking to a senator, calm as ever, but even from a distance, Mara could see the change. The subtle tightening of his shoulders, the stillness in his hand as he glanced at his phone. He read the same message. His glass clicked softly against the table. "Excuse me," he said, voice like glass cracking. Within seconds, the atmosphere shifted. His men, those quiet, unremarkable figures who blended into wallpaper, appeared from nowhere. A ripple moved through them, efficient and invisible. No panic, no shouting. The music never stopped. Mara fought her way toward him. "Where is she?" What did they mean? "Don't," he said, eyes cutting through her. "Not here." "But—" "I said, not here." The words were soft, but something in them made her obey. He turned to one of his men. "Lock down the exits." No one leaves without clearance. "Yes, sir." Another man approached, murmured something about security feeds. Rinaldi listened, nodded once, and dismissed him. It was terrifying, how calm he remained, how the world obeyed him without needing volume. But Mara couldn't stand still. "You're not calling the police?" "Not yet." "Not yet?" Her voice cracked. "A child is missing." His gaze met hers, cold, focused. "And if you call the police, she'll vanish for real." She wanted to argue, to scream, but deep down, she knew he was right. Whoever sent that message hadn't kidnapped Ava for ransom. They wanted him. They wanted leverage. Rinaldi's phone vibrated again. He read the message, expression unreadable. "You have 1 hour." He pocketed the phone, exhaled once through his nose, and turned to Mara. "You're leaving with Clara. Now." "I'm not leaving," she snapped. She's just a kid. She trusted you. I trusted—" He stepped closer, voice low. "Do you trust that I'll find her?" She froze. Because despite everything, the fear, the anger, she did. Rinaldi didn't wait for an answer. He signaled to his men. "Block the street routes, sweep the lower levels, use our feeds." One of them hesitated. "Sir, the rival crews—" "I don't care who it is. Bring me a location." Mara's chest ached. She watched him transform again. Humanity collapsing into strategy, mercy swallowed by precision. Every movement was measured, every word a command. "Rinaldi," she whispered, stepping close enough that he finally turned toward her. "You'll find her." "Please." He stared at her for a long moment, as if memorizing the shape of her fear. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay on the line." He pressed a phone into her palm. "You'll hear me no matter what happens." "Wait. What are you going to do?" He didn't answer, just brushed past her, coat flaring slightly as he strode toward the exit stairs. Mara followed to the door, but one of his men blocked her path. "He said stay put, ma'am." She clutched the phone, trembling. "I can't just—" "Ma'am," he repeated, eyes flat. "Trust him." The world outside the terrace seemed to hold its breath. Through the faint hum of the speakers, Mara heard Rinaldi's voice through the line, low, steady, impossible to mistake. Track the number. They'll move toward the docks. 2 cars, tinted windows. They won't risk open streets. The voices around him blurred. Orders, coordinates, static. Mara gripped the phone tighter, heart racing. Then suddenly, silence. "Victor?" she whispered. A pause. Then, "I have them." Before she could respond, the line went dead. The terrace fell back into uneasy calm. Guests whispered. The music faltered. Somewhere a glass shattered. Outside, far below, the city roared to life, engines in the dark, speeding toward the edge of everything. The pier was silent, except for the wind clawing at the sea. Rusted cranes loomed overhead like skeletons, and the tide lapped against the dock in rhythm with the steady crunch of Rinaldi's shoes. Midnight wrapped the place in darkness, the kind that felt deliberate, as if even the moon refused to witness what would happen here. He came alone. No guards, no gun. Just a weathered leather briefcase dangling from his right hand, its weight more damning than any weapon. The faint hum of engines echoed in the distance. 2 cars, idling just beyond the shadows. "Always dramatic?" a voice called from the dark. "You could have sent one of your dogs, Rinaldi." Rinaldi stopped beside an old shipping crate, the cold air fogging his breath. "You don't negotiate with dogs," he said evenly. "You negotiate with the one who feeds them." A laugh cracked through the night. From behind the rows of containers, a figure stepped out, sharp suit, cigarette burning like a tiny wound in the dark. The rival boss, Tomas Caldero. A man who'd built his reputation on chaos, where Rinaldi had built his on control. Caldero flicked the cigarette aside. "You know why you're here. One of mine ended up in prison. You turned over ledgers that shouldn't exist, so now—" He spread his hands, mock casual. "Now, we settle the cost." Behind him, Mara's voice trembled faintly through the phone pressed to Rinaldi's ear. She was still at the restaurant, her breath shallow, every sound feeding through the line. "Victor," she whispered, "don't do this." He didn't answer her. His gaze stayed fixed on Caldero. "Where is she?" he asked. Caldero smirked. "Safe, for now." He snapped his fingers. 2 men emerged from behind a container, dragging a trembling figure. A small girl in a red dress, her eyes wide with fear. Ava. Her wrists were bound, her knees scraped. Mara's muffled sob came through the phone. "Oh, God!" Rinaldi's jaw tightened. "Let her go." Caldero tisked softly. "You first. I want everything you took. The ledgers, the manifests, the names, all of it." Rinaldi lifted the briefcase slightly. "You'll have it. Every ship, every shell company, every crooked politician who ever shook your hand. Enough evidence to bury us all twice." Caldero chuckled, stepping closer. "And what makes you think I won't bury you first?" Rinaldi's eyes were calm, almost sad. "Because you need to believe you won. And killing me won't give you that. Taking what's in here will." He set the briefcase on the pier, the metallic click of the latch cutting through the cold air. Caldero hesitated. The game had shifted, the way it always did when Rinaldi spoke like that. He gestured to one of his men. "Check it." The thug crouched, opened the briefcase, and froze. Inside lay stacks of documents, flash drives, handwritten ledgers, a fortune in secrets. "Everything," Rinaldi said quietly. "You won't find another copy." Caldero exhaled a plume of smoke. "You're serious?" Rinaldi nodded once. "You get the records. I get the girl." Caldero tilted his head. "You're trading your kingdom for one child." "Why?" For a long moment, the wind drowned everything else. Then Rinaldi said, "Because she reminded me of who I was before I stopped being human." Mara's breath hitched on the other end of the line. Caldero smirked, though it faltered. "You've gone soft." "Maybe," Rinaldi said. Or maybe I'm done pretending hardness keeps a man alive. Caldero flicked his wrist, signaling his men. They shoved Ava forward and she stumbled into the open, crying softly. Rinaldi's chest ached at the sound, a sound so pure it shattered what little armor he had left. He took a slow step toward her, hands raised. "No sudden moves," one of the men barked. Rinaldi ignored him, kneeling as Ava reached him, small arms trembling as they clung to his coat. "It's over," he whispered, his voice breaking for the first time in years. "You're going home." Caldero laughed quietly. "Touching. Almost makes me forget what you are." Rinaldi stood, keeping Ava behind him. "You should forget. Because what I was dies tonight." Before Caldero could reply, headlights flared in the distance, brief sharp flashes reflecting off the black water. Sirens followed, faint but growing. Caldero's men cursed, scattering toward their cars. "What did you do?" Caldero snarled. Rinaldi's expression stayed unreadable. "I sent a copy." The rival's face twisted. "You—" "Go," Rinaldi said, voice quiet but absolute. "Before they decide you're worth arresting too." For a heartbeat, Caldero hesitated. Then he turned, barking orders as his men piled into their cars. The engines roared to life, tires screeching against the pier as the convoy vanished into the night. When the sound faded, Rinaldi's knees gave out. He sank against a crate, chest heaving, the taste of salt and metal in the air. Ava clung to his arm, crying quietly against his shoulder. He reached for the phone still pressed to his ear. "Mara," he murmured. Her voice came trembling through the line. "I'm here." "She's safe." A sob cracked her voice. "You did it." He looked out toward the black horizon, where the flashing lights of the approaching vans grew brighter. "I didn't save her," he said softly. "She saved me. Victor." He ended the call. The cold seeped into his bones as he pulled another phone from his pocket, a private line, one known only to a handful of people. He dialed a number, waited. A woman's voice answered, clipped and professional. "This is Special Agent Monroe." Rinaldi's voice was a whisper now, steady but hollow. "It's time. Take it all, every name, every ship, every ledger. You'll find them in the vault under Pier 41. A pause, then cautiously. "Rinaldi, are you sure?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." He hung up before she could say more. Moments later, floodlights cut through the fog, painting the dock in harsh white. Unmarked vans rolled in from every direction, doors slamming, agents shouting, the crackle of radios filling the air. Rinaldi didn't move. He just sat there, back against the crate, Ava's small hand still clutching his sleeve. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Are we going home now?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, little judge. You're going home." As the federal agents swarmed the pier, Rinaldi tilted his head back toward the stars, barely visible through the city haze. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was falling. He felt, finally, like he'd landed. The sky was still half asleep when they arrived. A soft mist clung to the terrace railings, and the city below shimmered with the pale promise of dawn. The chandeliers inside Elysian Terrace were dark now. Only the golden glow of morning spilling through the glass gave life to the empty restaurant. The world had gone quiet again. Victor Rinaldi walked in alone. No guards, no entourage, no coat heavy with expectation. Just a little girl's hand held gently in his own. Ava's red dress was rumpled from the long night, her curls messy but her spirit intact. She hummed softly as she skipped beside him, unafraid, as if the darkness that had swallowed her hours ago had been nothing more than a bad dream, now chased away by the sunrise. Mara was already there. She hadn't slept either. The manager had called just before dawn, stammering that Rinaldi was coming in, that the federal vans had swarmed the docks hours ago, that the newspapers were already whispering words like indictment and cooperation. But all Mara heard was that Ava was safe. So she came back to the restaurant, apron tied over her sleepless heart, and brewed coffee as if that simple act could anchor the morning. When she saw them step through the glass doors, her breath caught. Rinaldi looked different. The sharpness that once defined him, the precision, the iron, seemed softened, eroded by the night. His eyes were tired but clearer, as though he'd finally stepped out of a fog he hadn't realized he'd been walking through. Ava ran ahead, spinning once in the middle of the empty terrace. "It's pretty here in the morning," she said. "You can see the whole world wake up." Rinaldi smiled faintly, kneeling down until he was eye level with her. "I'm sorry I scared your night," he said quietly. Ava studied him with the kind of innocent scrutiny only a child could manage. "Do you yell a lot?" His lips twitched. "Less than I used to." She nodded solemnly, as if that was a perfectly acceptable answer. "Good." Yelling makes people small. He looked at her for a long moment before replying. "So does silence sometimes." Mara turned away, pretending to busy herself with the coffee machine, but the warmth in her chest betrayed her. The man who once turned fear into currency now spoke like someone learning the price of peace. When she brought their breakfast, a plate of toast, 2 soft-boiled eggs, and orange juice, he murmured a quiet thank you. She noticed the faint tremor in his hand as he lifted the cup. He was human now, almost painfully so. A briefcase rested on the table beside him, thinner than the one from the night before. When he opened it, it wasn't ledgers or deals inside, just a single stack of documents. He signed each page methodically, his handwriting deliberate, final. Mara approached hesitantly. "What is that?" He looked up. "A beginning," he said. "The Rinaldi Foundation for Child Witness Protection. It'll fund legal aid and relocation programs for kids caught in the kind of storms we make." Her throat tightened. "You named it after your mother?" "Elisa Rinaldi," he confirmed. "She believed mercy was power before I ever did." Outside, the city began to stir. Distant car horns, the clatter of shutters rising, the murmur of life rebuilding itself. The morning light crept higher, brushing against the terrace railings like forgiveness finding its way home. Across the dining room, 2 electricians finished installing new security lights by the entryway, Rinaldi's silent donation. Next to them, a manager taped a laminated sheet on the staff bulletin board. Code Amber. A protocol for missing persons written by Mara's hand. It was her idea, but his money that made it possible. Their last collaboration, perhaps, but one that would outlive them both. When the breakfast dishes were cleared, Rinaldi placed a sealed envelope on the counter. "For the staff fund," he said. Mara frowned. "You've already done enough." He shook his head. "No. I've done too much of the wrong things. Let this one be different." The envelope was heavy. Inside, she later learned, was the transfer of partial ownership of Elysian Terrace. His way of ensuring the people he once terrified would never bow to another name again. For a moment, silence settled between them. Not tense, not hollow, just full. Ava's voice broke it. "Mr. Frown?" He turned toward her. "You're smiling now," she said. Rinaldi chuckled softly. "Maybe it's your fault." Mara smiled too, but hers came with tears she didn't expect. She stepped closer, crouching beside Ava, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're safe now, sweetheart." "You did everything right." Ava nodded, proud. "I told him not to yell anymore." "I heard," Mara said, glancing at Rinaldi. "And I think he listened." The man who once ruled the city's silence simply nodded. "I did." When Clara arrived moments later, breathless and crying, Ava ran into her arms, babbling about boats and stars and Mr. Frown's breakfast. The two women embraced tightly, relief washing over them like the dawn itself. Rinaldi stood back, watching. The sight of mother and child seemed to unravel something inside him. He stepped toward the terrace doors, slipping his hands into his pockets. Mara called after him softly. "Victor." He turned. "Whatever happens next, I hope you find peace." He gave a small nod. "I think I just did." And with that, he walked out into the morning, disappearing into the city that once bent around his will. Mara watched until he was gone, then exhaled, the weight of months, maybe years, finally lifting from her shoulders. Ava tugged at her apron. "Do you work here every day?" Mara smiled, kneeling beside her. "Most days." "Can I visit again?" "Of course." Ava grinned. "Then you have to promise something." "What's that?" "No more scary people." Mara brushed a tear from her cheek, laughing softly. "That's the plan." Later that morning, when the first guests arrived, the new staff gathered for their daily briefing. Mara stood where Rinaldi once had, her tone calm, steady. "We serve food, not fear," she said simply. "If anyone forgets that, remind them why this place still stands." The team nodded, and she saw something she hadn't seen here in months. Ease. Outside, the sun finally climbed over the horizon, spilling golden light across the terrace. It looked just like that first night, the glass glowing, the city alive below. But the air was different now. There was no brittleness, no dread, only warmth, only peace. By the railing, Ava waved one last time before leaving with her mother. "Bye, Mr. Frown," she shouted into the city. Somewhere far away, maybe he heard, maybe he smiled. And as the day fully broke, the light touched everything it once feared to reach, turning even the coldest corners of Elysian Terrace to gold. If this story has your attention, hit that subscribe button and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Every story we tell connects the past to the present, and we'd love to have you with us for the next one.